everyone. It is 7 o'clock Eastern, so I think we'll get started. I've been chatting with a few folks already, so thanks so much for sending in a few notes. If anyone has trouble hearing me, if my microphone's a little low, please let me know, as opposed to like a half hour from now. But yeah, thanks so much for joining us. This is the 2025 group insurance rollout. I'm still getting used to saying 2025. I'm Kevin Deckinga with League of American Bicyclists, our membership and development director. Many of you know me as the guy who sends you emails and other things. I'm joined tonight by Gina Doyle and Renee Watterson at American Specialty Headquarters, and you're in the same room. Thanks so
We
much.
are.
Yeah. Okay. A couple people say they're having trouble hearing me. I'll turn up my microphone a little bit more and I'll try to enunciate. How's that? Okay. Well, we're so grateful that you're spending the evening with us. Yeah, we'll just jump right in. How's that? So some light housekeeping. This call is being recorded and it will be sent to everybody who registered. So your board members and colleagues that registered but couldn't join, they'll all get sent this. So no worries there. Save all the questions for the end, and we'll be using the Q&A function. We've been doing this for a few years, so we sort of anticipate some of the questions that come up, so we will try to tailor this presentation to those questions. So please save them for the end. And when you do ask a question, try to be general and relevant to the rest of the group. Anything else can be directed to Renee Watterson, R. Watterson at AmericanSpecialty.com afterward. Okay. Thank you, of course. Your participation in this program, your membership with the League, this is about so much more than insurance. This is about your club, your organization, taking a stand to pool our voice and work for change here in Washington. There are right now over 400 member advocacy organizations and 500 member clubs. And all member clubs and orgs can buy into this cooperative policy program. So you're a member, you're here. If you're not sure if your group is a member, visit bikeleague.org/renew, and you can search by zip code or email address. And feel free to reach out to me directly, Kevin at bikeleague.org, with questions. Your membership supports all of our work in Washington. Yes, our critical work on Capitol Hill, it's more important than ever. It helps generate funding for bike lanes and bike trails. In fact, in most places, 80% of the funding for bike lanes and trails has federal origins. That's very much us. We're building a coalition of health, environmental, and safety orgs in Washington, and your support helps our build the case for more biking and walking facilities. And it supports our Bicycle Friendly America program, where we work with cities, towns, universities, and state DOTs to encourage more biking and safer streets, and more planning and participation in bike amenities. We're also the smart cycling folks. There's many League cycling instructors on this call. I see all the names, so I recognize many of you. If you're not sure what an LCI is, a League cycling instructor is someone who is trained and licensed and certified and insured to teach our smart cycling curriculum. Find out more about that at bikeleague.org. Our League cycling instructors touch the lives of tens of thousands of adults and kids in building the skill and confidence to ride safely every year. And then, of course, finally, we're the hosts of the National Bike Summit coming up in just about 8 weeks. So I do want to invite each and every one of you to come join us in Washington. It's going to be a big one. It's our 25th anniversary National Bike Summit. Confirmed plenary speakers now include NTSB Chair Jennifer Homendy, and author Wes Marshall. So it's got some big names. It's going to be a great event. Early bird pricing ends on Friday. And if your group is a Major Taylor affiliated or Black Girls Do Bike affiliated group, we also have some scholarship pricing incentives thanks to our good friends at SRAM. Okay, I'm almost done, I promise. Many of you remember a survey that our intern and I sent around early in 2024. We're working to compile a new club resource guide with common practices and tips and guidance for bike clubs, be it in governance, website development, marketing, ride leader training. It's all there and it continues to grow. Check it out at bikeleague.org. You'll see it under Take Action and Bike Clubs. It's a work in progress. We would love to have your documents as a part of it too. So feel free to reach out to me to add your voice to it. Okay, finally, contact me anytime. I am Kevin at bikeleague.org. And here's the contact info for both Renee and Gina. It'll be on their slides too. And we'll reference back to this later. Yeah, and I think with that, I'll turn it over to Gina.
Thank you, Kevin.
Oh, and I'll stop my share. How's that?
Sounds great.
Okay.
So, can you see my screen?
Yep. Looks good.
Very good. I actually have to put you on mute for 1 second.
Sure.
I apologize for that. You might have seen the lights go out behind us. I heard someone. We have a very, very, let's say, sophisticated system in our office, which is we absolutely start yelling, "Is anybody still here?" when the last person is leaving. And I heard the noise that someone said that, and I saw the lights go out. So as opposed to having the alarm go off during this presentation, I put you all on mute so that or myself on mute so that Renee could chase after and make sure that we can continue on here. So if I can get folks to give like a thumbs up in the chat that you can hear me. I do have a couple of people saying, does anybody hear anything? So good. Sounds like everybody can hear well, so that's great. Wanted to start out and just talk a little bit about American Specialty and the League's insurance, really our relationship, right? This, I call it a relationship. Anytime you're in a business relationship, oftentimes we call it a partnership, but with the League, I really refer to it as a relationship because that's really what it is. We are invested as an organization in really supporting the League from, all the advocacy work that you're doing to providing whether it's risk management resources or whatever it might be. So we are celebrating our 33rd year of having partnered with the League and all of its member clubs. And we couldn't be more excited to continue in this role and to be part of this amazing movement and to see the growth that all of you have had over the years. So thank you for that. Thank you for your partnership, each of you who's on the phone, whether you've been part of the insurance program, if you will, for a very long time, or even just recently joined, or even just considering joining. So certainly want to thank all of you. So we have, as a group in this partnership, quite a few dedicated resources as it relates to insurance. The first and foremost being the League staff. And that's important because Kevin and his team and Bill, from leadership down, they have a pretty high standard when it comes to the insurance program, right? And they should, because they are making decisions and offering programs that ultimately will allow the member clubs to be able to do what they need to do from an advocacy perspective, as well as just all of the club work that you do, whether it's bicycle refurbishment or whatever it might be that you're getting into, coming into 2025. So the league staff plays a really, really important role in helping us structure the insurance program. The online insurance and risk management platform. So we have the platform available, which is really a landing place, I would say, where we are able to put some risk management tools. We can also, you can also find the insurance brochure on there if you have questions. I think you might even, Renee, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think sometimes we have posted the video from the recording from this webinar on there, just for your quick reference. So lots of information on that platform. And so that is a resource for all of the member clubs. And then the American Specialty teammates. We believe here at American Specialty that is, a big part of any relationship is the teammates that we have dedicated to the program. And so I love to get on here and see that, I think one of the first comments that jumped out to me was like, wow, we get to see Renee's real self. Everybody has talked to Renee on the phone, or many people have talked to Renee on the phone for a lot of years. And so Renee has personal relationships with many of you. And so we really value that as part of the partnership. Our role really is to help you navigate insurance world, right? Answer coverage questions. Maybe you have some questions on the enrollment process. Maybe you're trying to schedule a special event online and you have some questions. And then in the event that something does go wrong at your event, making sure that we have experienced claims specialists ready to come alongside you and help you through that process. Because one thing that we know for certain is that that the claims process is, if you've not ever been through it, it is really outside of the norm of anything that you've probably ever experienced, because there's lots of different people asking you lots of different questions, whether it's the plaintiff's attorney, whether it's us from an insurance perspective, whatever it might be. So having that experienced claims staff ready, who has also, many of them have worked with the league for 20 plus years, is really important. We also have risk management resources. So some of those are on the website, like we talked about. Some of them might be just based on conversations that you have with Renee, and she may be able to provide some risk management recommendations, or she may pull in our risk services department to help navigate a particular situation. So those are some of the core, I would say, resources that we offer as a group, as part of the partnership. And just as by way of a quick introduction of what the league insurance program includes, we wanted to talk a little bit about the coverages that are included, but why is it beneficial to a member club to secure their insurance through the league's insurance program, right? So one of the things that we really strongly believe in and has benefited the member clubs for a long time is group purchasing power, where all of our member clubs are coming together. And while each individual member club has its own policy limits and its own protections, you get to come together. And when we go to an insurance company on your behalf, we get their attention, right? Because if you pool everyone together, we're a much bigger fish in the pond than if we were a little minnow trying to get coverage. Not that any of our member clubs are minnows, so please don't hear me in saying that. What I'm saying, just in terms of sizes of what kind of really gets the attention of an insurance company, to the point that then allows us to do some things that maybe they wouldn't do for someone else if you were just trying to go as Gina and Renee advocacy organization. So the other thing that the group purchasing power does is it allows member clubs who have experienced a loss, right, a liability loss. We've had our share of liability losses as we look through just nationally at the things that take place. One thing that we always have to remember is the number of events and activities and rides that take place on an annual basis where nothing does go wrong. Kudos to all of you. So you all are doing a great job with that. But on occasion, we have a situation and a lawsuit does arise, or a claim of a lawsuit arises. And to be able to know that I'm part of this group and my rates aren't going to, I'm going to be able to continue to secure coverage. I'm not going to be non-renewed, right? Like you hear horror stories of like, oh, I have two teenage daughters who are getting ready to drive, they're twins, and I think my insurance premiums are going to go through the roof, which I have to just, I guess, I don't know. I just have to accept that as, as part of life. But what I like to know is that my insurance company, if something bad does happen and, there's a limits loss, meaning that the policy pays out all of the limits that I've purchased, that, it's really powerful to know that you're part of a bigger group and that you are still going to be able to secure coverage because for the most part, um, a lot of organizations, probably a little less for the league member clubs, I would say, but for a lot of organizations, they can't exist without insurance, right? A member club could potentially exist without insurance because you might not be having to pull a permit from the city where they're going to require certificates of insurance. But many of your boards would say, we're not going to do that without insurance, right? Like we're not okay putting our assets at risk here. So that's one of the biggest benefits, in my opinion, of the league insurance program. And then also being able to have more of a customized program. At American Specialty, we have always, and I don't want to say never, but I anticipate that we always will only be in the sports, entertainment, and leisure industry. I'm unfortunately not able to write my own auto coverage for my twin daughters who are getting ready to drive, right? Because it falls outside of that really that niche target audience that we have, which is sports, entertainment, and leisure. Gosh, sorry, it's late. I guess it's a full day plus. So the two coverages that are automatically included as part of the core insurance program, depending on your exposures, depending on what you are doing as a club, are general liability coverage and excess accident medical coverage. And we're going to talk a little bit about what those are. So general liability coverage is the liability protection for your member club, for your volunteers, if you're a member club that has employees, for your employees, for claims that might come against the club for alleged negligence. So a couple of examples of things that we've seen, over the years. It could be a situation where we're on a club ride and the club ride takes us over, let's say, I don't know, we're going to say it takes us through a gravel, we just go, from pavement to gravel to pavement, and somebody slips on that gravel, right? And as a result, they crash and there's an injury. Generally speaking, you would probably look at that and say, hey, this is just a risk associated with cycling. Are there some lessons learned as a bike club? Maybe, did we do the things like warning people that we're going to be, navigating over different types of land? Probably. That's what we find when we get into the claims and the lawsuits. For the most part, the member clubs are always doing the right thing. They're handling the warnings, and they're giving warnings, and they're exercising with caution. And so, but sometimes that small accident that we think should just be part of the assumption of cycling, just like it's an assumption of anything that we do every day, will result in a claim or an allegation against the club or the ride leader. Perhaps they say the ride leader failed to tell me that this was going to happen, or I forgot and the ride leader didn't remind me. So there's lots of things that could potentially generate a general liability claim. So that would be an example. Another example would be if you, let's say, we're having a special event or a fundraising event, however you want to refer to that, and you do have to pull a permit with the city is likely going to require a certificate of insurance. And so that's when someone requires a certificate of insurance, the general liability policy is really what they are referring to. That's the coverage that they want to see. That is also the coverage that is, in my opinion, the most important for a league, right? Because it provides coverage for alleged or actual bodily injury claims, property damage liability, and personal advertising injury. So property damage liability and personal and advertising injury, I don't, for this group, I'm not extremely focused. It's great to have that coverage, and there could be a claim because you never know what could happen. But the bodily injury claims, like the example I shared, where somebody is injured and they make a claim against your member club, against your ride leader, who is either, an employee or a volunteer of the club. So that is I would say that the one of the two core coverages, but the one where I think is really the most important. The excess accident medical coverage is more of a first party coverage. So think about that coverage as I am a member of your club. We're on a club ride. I, am involved in a crash, and I have my own insurance, but I have a $5,000 deductible. And this policy is designed to help offset that out-of-pocket medical expenses for an injury that occurs during an activity that is authorized, organized, and supervised and meets the policy definition of a special event if it is that. So that's more of a first party coverage, meaning that the person who's injured, if it's a member of the club, then that's the coverage that would apply to them. The general liability coverage is the coverage that's in place if someone threatens or brings a claim or lawsuit against the club or any of its leaders there for alleged negligence. So that was a really long explanation. I apologize for that. But jumping into the next slide here, I know Kevin talked about advocacy organizations and bike clubs for the league, right? What we like to do is just clarify for the insurance policy, our definition might be a little bit different than the leagues, right? But the insurance company needs to be able to really differentiate between the two. So what we've done is we've said an advocacy organization, and again, this is for insurance purposes only, the advocacy organization would be in a club with 26 or fewer club rides annually, and those club rides would average 50 or fewer rides for each ride. So if you're a member club and you meet that criteria, when you go to enroll or even to look at the pricing of your insurance program, you would be looking at the advocacy organization pricing. A bike club is a member club of the league who offers 27 or more club rides annually. So if you're riding weekly as a club, you would need to register and look at rates and things like that as a bike club. So I wanted to start with those definitions. And then over the years, I think Kevin had mentioned we've been doing this for a lot of years and together, and we do try to improve each year on what we're offering and how we offer it. So I am not necessarily one who likes to automatically jump into the rates, but I do find that if I don't jump into the rates quickly, that I start getting these chat messages about what is the rate, and I can understand that, right? It's been a long day for everybody. So we're going to jump right into the rates for 2025. And again, we have the rates broken out between advocacy organization and bike club. Right? Remembering again that an advocacy organization is an organization who offers 26 or fewer rides throughout the year. And so just by way of background, I would share that this year, which has been what we as a team between the league and American Specialty, as well as the good work of all of the member clubs have been working towards, we are, I would say, in line with market conditions, insurance market conditions, which is where we want to be. Oftentimes where we are is we have the market conditions plus a lot of development on our claims, right? Meaning that we've had more claims than maybe the insurance company anticipated, or that more claims than the market price would allow. So we've had to take larger rate increases to offset those claims costs. So being in a spot where you're consistent with market conditions is a really good place to be. And really kudos to the league as an organization, as well as each of the member clubs, and making sure that you're doing everything right. And I think I hope I didn't skim over it, but when I said that when we do have a liability claimant come in and we start to dig in and talk to the clubs, it is very rare that the club didn't do everything right. But we live in a society where we can really sue or make a claim against anyone for any reason, and therefore, even if there's not a actual court date where everything goes through the court system and then here's the payout, there's defense costs associated with that, right, to be able to defend you, so that the club doesn't have to come up with the money to pay for your for legal representation. So for an advocacy organization, where we are, and again, this is we actually have advocacy organization broken into two categories too. If you're an advocacy organization and you don't offer any club rides or any social rides, you need to sign up as an advocacy organization with exactly that, no club or social rides, because that would provide you only liability insurance, right? If you're not out on bikes as an organization, you don't need the additional first party excess accident medical coverage. So we only want you to purchase the liability coverage, because otherwise you're purchasing something you don't need. So the annual increase for that coverage year over year for the base coverage is $32. So the premium increased to $356 annually for that group. And again, that provides $1 million limit and a $5 million per club aggregate. And what that means is that your advocacy organization can have up to 5 separate $1 million claims under the policy, liability claims, or 10 separate $500,000 claims under the policy. So meaning that the policy is never going to pay out for more than $1 million for any one occurrence, but it will pay up to $5 million if you have multiple claims in 1 year. Then we have the rate for advocacy organizations who do offer club or social rides, and that premium, the base premium for advocacy organizations with rides, is $452 annually. Again, same liability limits apply there. You still have your separate $5 million per club limit from an aggregate perspective, but you also have the excess accident medical coverage, because again, this is the piece where when you have people out on rides and if there is an injury, that excess accident medical policy has really helped to offset medical expenses to prevent somebody from having to make a claim against your club, right? We would much rather it be a friendly experience where, like, oh, well, you're a member club. You've either, I don't know, some clubs might charge dues, others, I think I've heard, don't always charge dues, but you've paid your dues. And with that, you have access to this excess accident medical coverage if you were injured during a club ride. So with that, the annual increase is $26 year over year for the base coverage. So that, I think in general, it probably shakes out to be about 6%. So low single digit increase, mid single digit increase, which is, we were very thankful for being able, because of the work that you all have done, to be able to deliver that news. And then we'll get into these rates here in a second, but there's optional business coverages that I know some advocacy organizations will add on. As an example, if you're an advocacy organization that offers education courses, there's additional premium for that, bike refurbishment, additional premium for that. And the reason that for the additional charge there is we don't want an advocacy organization who does not offer bike refurbishment to have to pay for that coverage, right? We could look at it and say that the policy automatically includes coverage for all these things, but it's going to increase the cost. What we would rather do is be able to say, like, okay, Club A is offering these services. We want to be able to insure them for sure. We want to make sure they have the proper coverage, but we also don't want Club B, who doesn't offer the coverages, to have to pay that premium. So just keep that in mind as you're looking at the costs and as we go through the rest of the premiums here. So for bike club premium, wanted to talk a little bit about this. So the bike club premium is based on the annual membership at the peak of your club activities, right? So if you are sitting where Kevin is in Chicago, or in Indiana where Renee and I are sitting tonight, or actually a lot of places throughout the US that are very cold right now, you might want to use your annual membership numbers for January and February. But what we would ask when you enroll is that you use the membership numbers, looking across the year at the peak level. So, as an example, we might anticipate a club in Indiana, the peak being in June or July or August, right? So thinking about it from that perspective, we don't audit that number. We trust, your judgment and what you're going to provide to us. We appreciate if there's a significant change, which we've had this come up, over the years, where someone is like, hey, we took off, and we are growing like crazy. Are we still in the right level in terms of what we're paying? And we try to be fair on that, right? Like we're not, it's not auditable, and we appreciate that partnership. So if you ever have any questions, just reach out to us. We're happy to talk through it with you. The per member rate. So the premium is, like I said, based on the annual membership. So when you go in to enroll, you'll choose a category, either 0 to 1,000, 1,001 to 2,000, or over 2,000. And you can see here the increase per member year over year. Again, this shakes out to be about 6% in general. And so anywhere from 43-cent increase to 50-cent increase per member. So I say that, but please don't hear me in saying it lightly. I know that 50 cents, times 1,000 individuals is an increase, and that's an increase that all will have if you move forward. So I am trying to give just the facts here, but please don't take it as being insensitive, because that is certainly not my intent. One thing that we were really happy about is that the minimum premium for clubs did not increase. So we have quite a few clubs who fall into that minimum premium level, meaning that perhaps you are in that 0 to 1,000 range, and but you don't have, you don't have, the insurance company says, we're not willing to put up $1 million per occurrence and $5 million for this club unless we have at least the minimum premium. So in recent years, we've seen that minimum premium increase as well, which is really what we would expect, but we were successful at keeping that flat this year. So that will benefit some of our bike clubs. And again, the rates here are for your base coverages, and we'll get into the optional coverages here in just a second. I keep saying that, and I'm really hopeful that I did. I'm really hopeful that I did include those in the slide deck. So special event premium. So first of all, what is a special event? A special event is an event where the club, whether it's an advocacy organization who has signed up for offering, rides, or a bike club, again, from an insurance definition perspective, where you're charging a fee for participation in that event. So if you have an event where you're charging a fee, you need to schedule that event onto your insurance policy. And you do that through the online platform, or if you have questions, you can always reach out to a member of our team and we can walk you through that. So what you do is you go onto the online platform and you estimate how many people you're thinking you're going to have, and you put the date of the event. You do estimate, right?
No,
you don't estimate.
All they do is schedule.
I apologize. You don't estimate. As soon as I said that, so you just put the date of the event, and then within 30 days after the event, you go back in and that's when you put in the actual number of participants. Again, with the idea that we don't want you to pay for participants that aren't there, right? We only want you to pay premium for those who are there. The other thing to remember is when you are paying for special events, if you are a bike club, so you've enrolled as a bike club, not as an advocacy organization, and you have club members participating in the event, you do not have to count them in your special event enrollment, because we've already collected premium for them, right? We've already collected the annual premium. So as an example, if you have a special event and you have I'm just going to use 1,000 participants at your special event, and 500 of them are your member club or your club members. You're going to use the number 500 because you've already paid for 500 of them, and you're going to use that number. So don't double count your club, your club members when you're scheduling a special event. So the cost, there was a slightly bigger increase on the special event premium. And the reason that we do this, the reason we kind of loaded it into the special event premium is because you are charging a fee for participation in this event. And while it is going up, if you're, as an example, going up 96 cents per participant, if you fall into that 0 to 1,000 category of the number of participants, what we wanted to do was for you to theoretically be able to pass that on to the participants, right? We're charging a fee. We know the insurance cost is going up by $1, so participation is, instead of going up by $1, so it's, the 14.47 as an example. So we try to be creative in that way. Again, one, so that you're not double paying for participants. That's not what we're looking for. And two, trying to position it so whenever possible, you're able to help recuperate some of your insurance costs, because I know insurance is a line item that none of us want to see, whether it's a business or personal, right? But it's necessary, unfortunately. So again, the liability for a special event, you're going to have that liability limit. It's going to be that $1 million for your per occurrence with a $5 million aggregate. And then also, because we are participating in on bike, you'll have the excess accident medical coverage, $10,000 per accident per member. Mountain biking special events have a slightly higher rate just in general. I didn't take and put the mountain biking special event costs on here only because when we looked back, we haven't had any mountain biking special events scheduled over the past few years. So I thought, just for the sake of trying to stay focused on what the audience might be looking for. So those, again, that's the premium for our core coverages, the league's core coverages. And then we have elective coverages. And the first group here that's under annual premium, you'll be able to see the change in premium for the different categories. So if you're offering bike refurbishment, then your year over year for adding bike refurbishment to your policy increased by $36. And you can see their leased office space if you're a member club who has a leased office space. If you're a member club with leased warehouse space, you would have the option to add liability coverage onto your policy for these exposures. So I want to talk a little bit about education because, right, that's where the league, in my opinion, thrives. In addition to just, reaching so many people, offers really good education and does that through its member clubs. And so we have two options for education. And then within each of those options, we have two premium levels. So there's the classroom only education, and that would be no on-bike activities at all. And so the annual premium for that is $274. But if all of your classroom education without on-bike activities is conducted by an LCI, which Kevin talked about the definition of an LCI, a lead cycling instructor, then the rate goes down to $210. So there's a premium savings there because of the fact that we, we're able to share with the carrier the different types of education that's offered and the level and the what is all included in that. So for education where on-bike education is also provided, so you're going on a ride or doing something in a parking lot, the annual rate is $703 unless you're using all LCIs to provide that education, and then the rate annually is $457. And then mountain biking rides, if you are a club who offers mountain bike rides, not rides where we're gonna, like the claims example that I talked about earlier, where we go over a gravel area as part of our ride, or a ride where some folks are coming with their mountain bikes. I don't consider that a mountain biking ride, right? A true, we have a mountain biking group that meets weekly or monthly, and we go on a 2-hour ride. That is a club with mountain bike rides. And so if you have that, then we would recommend adding on coverage for those mountain bike rides, and that is annually $307. So these numbers are, again, about 10% increase over expiring. And again, that is just so that we can ensure that we are allowing clubs to only purchase coverage for those exposures where they are offering the activities and not just increasing the cost across the board. So those are things that are available through the online enrollment process. And then there are some optional coverages that we have clubs who utilize us for to place these coverages. The first being the directors and officers liability coverage. This is a policy that I recommend to any organization, except any nonprofit organization, because what it does is it provides coverage for the wrongful acts, including employment practices type losses of the club itself or its volunteers or its employees. So let's take as an example that you are a bike club and you have you have a member, and the member is making people feel uncomfortable, right? Just in general. I don't know why the member's making them feel uncomfortable. The board or the directors, the officers, the leader, whoever, decides and looks at it and says like, hey, here's the situation. I don't know that I feel great about it. I do think we need to ask that member to not be part of our club. And the claims example is that the member feels like they were discriminated against, maybe, right? Maybe I was the one who was asked not to be part of the club anymore, and I feel like, yes, that's because I'm a female. Of course they don't want me to be part of the club, and I'm going to bring a suit against them for discrimination. That claim is not covered under your general liability policy, because remember that general liability policy is designed to provide coverage for bodily injury claims, and the directors and officers liability is designed to provide coverage for wrongful acts of the organization. And then there's an additional coverage piece that provides coverage for employment related practices. And it might not be an employee, but those are the types of claims. So think of like, discrimination or harassment, those types of claims. The two policies are really designed to dovetail each other. The general liability policy says I'm not covering that, and the directors and officers liability says I'm not covering anything that has to do with employment practices, nor am I covering the wrongful acts that don't result in a bodily injury claim. So sometimes we get asked the question, I probably have shared this if you've been on several of the presentations that we've offered. Sometimes people will say, hey, Gina, which one should I purchase? Should I purchase general liability or directors and officers liability? And I say, like, man, if I could predict that, I would not be sitting in an office all day, because I would be able to predict the future of what you are going to be sued for or what claims are going to be made against you. So I strongly recommend both coverages, but understand that each club has to make a business decision. So the directors and officers liability policy, while it's not part of the enrollment into the core insurance program, there is an online process that you get to from the landing page that we talked about before, where you can enroll and purchase coverage directly from that website. So, from our landing page, I apologize. And again, same thing. You can go on and get a quote and decide not to purchase coverage. Maybe you want to see what it looks like and share it with your board. That's absolutely fine. But you can see the general costs here. Non-owned and hired automobile liability coverage. We recommend this for organizations, whether it's a bike club or any other organization, if you have anyone driving on your behalf. So for the most part, for member clubs, where we see people driving on behalf of a member club is either driving like a lag vehicle or maybe running errands on behalf of the member club. And if you have that exposure, we would recommend that you consider a non-owned and hired automobile liability policy. That's something that we can help you out with. It's also something that you might be able to go to a local agent, right, and get an option to consider. We do it more as an accommodation. It's not, the non-owned and hired automobile liability isn't customized like the general liability policy, right? It's just a standard non-owned and hired automobile liability. And then we have some clubs who either choose to purchase limits above what is provided through the core insurance program, or somebody mandates that they purchase additional limits. So think about, again, pulling that permit and the city says you need $2 million per occurrence. And you're like, I have $5 million aggregate. And they're like, well, you need 2 million per occurrence. The way you get there is through an excess policy. So if you run into that, let us know. We have a pretty straightforward system process. It is offline where we individually underwrite that for you. So we wanted to focus some attention on some of our most frequently asked questions on these types of webinars. And so what is a covered activity, right? Like I'm a bike organization, or I'm a bike club, or an advocacy organization. What's this cover? We're really trying to cover the business operations of your member club for your cycling type activities, right? So I always use the example of, and I'll use it again later here, of if I have a real estate company and a bike club, I'm not going to be able to combine those two exposures. I'm going to need separate policies because they're separate exposures. But a covered activity, just think about like club meetings, fundraisers, special events if you schedule them. Club activity can include a time trial. We don't do racing. We don't cover racing, but we certainly cover time trials, bike education courses, club rides. And we always just say, when in doubt, confirm the coverage applies. If you have a question, reach out, send an email, pick up, give us a call. We're happy to talk through it. Some things, red flag activities that that we don't contemplate under the policy. Racing, I already talked about that. For-profit tours, rental or bike share programs, commercial bike or repair shops, like we do bike refurbishment. But if if it's evolved into a commercial bike or repair shop, you have a different exposure. And that's why we don't want to cover it here. We want you to make sure that you have the right coverage that protects you for the coverage that you need. You can see them here, randonneur events, and then events that are greater than 5 days in length, or international events. Those are things that don't automatically provide coverage under the policy. We get the question often about, are release of liability waivers required? And if they are required, why do we still have lawsuits, right? And so release of liability waivers are strongly recommended. And most of our member clubs are awesome at wanting waivers, because you want to be able to reduce your liability. And this is a key place where you can, reduce your liability, is requiring release liability waivers. If you do have a traditional true mountain bike event or club ride, before that club ride, you have to get a release liability waiver. So that's the only place that it is required. So that's the answer to the first question of like, are they required? The answer to the second question of like, why do we still have lawsuits if we had a waiver signed? And the applicability or defensibility arising from that involving the release liability waivers varies from state to state, right? If it is not to pick on any of our New York clubs at all, if it's in New York, the release liability waiver isn't going to hold up very well. If you're in Indiana, we have a pretty strong release liability waiver state. And so regardless of whether or not we think that the waiver automatically removes the liability for the club, it always gives us something to talk about, right? Because when I say that, what I mean is that oftentimes these claims are, I didn't know because I didn't know that we were going to go over this gravel, and therefore I couldn't have assumed the risk associated with that because I didn't know. And a lot of times this comes from a cyclist of many years, right? I could probably say that and it would be very truthful because I am not a cyclist. So but what the waiver does is it allows us, we might not be able to release you completely from the lawsuit, but what we can do is start to prove assumption of risk and use it to, again, give us something to talk about, to push back a little bit on that plaintiff, to say, you did sign this waiver, regardless of whether or not it holds up. You knew that there were risks associated with whatever it is that you were participating in, and it is very helpful in the defensibility of a claim. So it doesn't always remove all liability whatsoever, and it doesn't always avoid an actual lawsuit being able to be filed, but it certainly gives us something to work with from a defensibility perspective. We've had questions about, can we cover non-competitive walking as a component of our bike club? And yes, we added that a couple of years ago. That was something where there was a need, and just like a traditional club activity, as long as it is an activity that is organized by the club and scheduled and start and stop at the same place, that's something that can be covered under the policy, or is covered under the policy. E-bikes, get the question about, do we provide coverage for e-bikes? And we've evolved in this area over the years as a team, from trying to carve out certain e-bikes that are covered and certain e-bikes that are not covered. But because of your long-term relationship and partnership with your insurance company, which is Arch Insurance Company, American Specialty is the agent, that we were able to get to a point where electric bikes, as long as they meet the definition provided under the Consumer Product Safety Commission, they are acceptable. So the policy doesn't require us to determine which class of bikes are covered or not covered. It's just, we don't want to pick up like a ride where we have, motorized, motorcycles or mopeds or something like that. But certainly a traditional e-bike would be covered under the policy. Okay. Mountain biking, we talked about this already, where a waiver is required before each ride. Helmets are required for mountain biking events. And again, helmets are not a requirement of a traditional bike club ride, but for mountain biking it is. And the reason for that, if you're wondering, like, why are there stricter requirements in place for mountain biking? It's not on road. There's a lot of things you can look at, and it's very, you can say that is a safer environment sometimes than not being able to control what a vehicle is going to do. So it really is just the market experience. When I say market, the insurance claims experience involving mountain biking, it has many insurance carriers concerned. So we got to a point where we can provide the coverage, but we needed to make sure that we had some risk management protocols in place that, one, helped protect the individuals, but two, provided the insurance company with a level of comfort to be able to offer that coverage. And so the definition of mountain biking, again, it's not that I have a club ride and Gina shows up with her mountain biking because she's just trying to, she's just figuring everything out. It is a traditional mountain bike, club ride where you're coming together and you are all on mountain bikes. You're going off road, so doing traditional mountain biking activities. So rough terrain, that is an indication, but you're going to have other rough terrain, right? That doesn't qualify as a mountain biking activity. So again, if you have questions about that, feel free to reach out to Renee. For the most part, I think we have clubs who offer mountain biking, and it's, I think, generally easy for the clubs to navigate whether or not they need to secure additional coverage. LCI and seminar coaches coverage. So LCIs are automatically covered under the insurance policy for things that they're doing, one, in accordance with the league protocols, like smart cycling seminars. If we're out there, again, teaching real estate class, the LCI isn't going to be covered for that. But if you're out there teaching smart cycling seminars in accordance with the league protocols and you have the certification, the policy is designed to follow you there. Again, coverage is provided automatically. If you need proof of insurance, just reach out. We're happy to provide that for you. Several years ago at the summit, we had a club session and we had a lot of dialogue regarding LLCs, especially as it relates to LCIs. And how do I get coverage for my LLC, right? Like I, as a person, am individually insured under the league's policy, but what about my LLC? So we were able to expand the policy to provide coverage for LLCs that are created by an LCI for the sole purpose of handling payments for bicycle education class. So again, this is my real estate definite explanation here. If you have an LLC, Gina Doyle Real Estate LLC, this policy isn't for you for that. If you have Gina Doyle LCI LLC, that's a lot of L's, then that can that the policy automatically provides that coverage. You don't need to have it endorsed on the policy. We just have broad language on there that will pick up that exposure for you. If you have questions about whether or not your LLC could be covered or is covered, feel free to reach out. We're getting close here. So the insurance enrollment next steps. So if you will receive notice and by email, we'll do a blast to all of our, the blast will go to everybody who currently has coverage under the policy. Anybody who's reached out to Renee or I and said like, hey, I'd really be interested in this program going forward, as well as thank you for whoever just clarified that it should be purchased for 2025, not 2024. Yes, you are exactly right. So you'll receive notice that the purchase insurance for 2025 link is live. Our target date for activating that link is Friday of this week. So we will hopefully get that activated and get messaging out to you. If not on Friday, for sure on Monday. Sometimes our IT department frowns on releasing things on a Friday, because what happens is if there is an issue, everybody's going to the website and then you can't get a hold of anybody until Monday, and we don't like that for you. So just give us a little bit of grace there between Friday and Monday. If we can get it in place and activated and everything sent out by like Friday morning, we'll certainly do that. So the link is here. Oh my goodness, here's this whole slide is 2024 date, so I apologize here. But complete the enrollment questionnaire and pay for coverage online. If you enroll prior to February 1st of 2025, your coverage will go into effect on February 1st, because that's when the policy begins of 25. If you enroll after February 1st of 25, your coverage goes into effect the date of your enrollment. And if you have any questions or need additional information, feel free to reach out to our team. And I could not get off of that slide fast enough because it has the wrong dates. So I actually might have accidentally, oh goodness, I think I should stop sharing. I was trying to bring up my, hang on here, let's see, stop share. I was trying to bring up our contact information, but perhaps.
Yeah, I'll share mine. How's that?
Thank you.
Yeah.
I can see it on this screen.
There we go.
Perfect.
Okay.
Right.
That was awesome. Thanks so much, Gina. I have been furiously typing and answering questions. So we've got some that I think that I'd like to cover live if you're up for it.
Sure.
But yeah, let's kick it off with. Can you provide some good examples of best practices to keep our liability as a club to a minimum, or can you point us to those resources?
Yeah, so there will be some resources on the website that we talked about. So again, the release liability waiver is going to be key in helping to reduce that liability. Again, it's not going to prevent someone ever from filing a claim against you or making a claim. But a lot of the things that we talk about, and that you all do a really good job of, and I know you do a good job of this because when we get a claim, these are the things that we ask and these are the answers that we get. So making sure that we have that ride leader, right? Making sure that we're doing the things like the inspection of the course before we take off for the club ride. Making sure that we're reporting incidents timely, because that can sometimes cause frustration for someone who was injured, of like, hey, I was injured and I thought that I was going to be covered under the accident policy. And then, we don't have the actual claim in house, or HSR doesn't. And then they start, talking to an attorney as an example. So that quick reporting of anything that does go wrong, knowing that that isn't going to impact your insurance premiums, the number of claims that you report. The only thing that impacts is like if, there's a loss paid out, which is fine. That's why you're buying insurance. And I think about, the things that you're already doing, like the helmets, the safety protocol, recommendations that are provided through, the league and through the clubs, and all of the experience that all of you have. So a cycling organization or a cycling club like your member clubs, Kevin, is a lot different than when we write coverage for a venue. So think about a stadium as an example. We can go through and say, hey, maybe at an escalator, you should have someone at the bottom of the escalator to make sure that everybody gets off safely. Or maybe we say, the person who's responsible for snow removal isn't doing a very good job. We've had a lot of slip, trip, and falls here. That's a little bit different than the cycling clubs like yours, because you all are out and about, right? You're not really in those four-wall facilities where that exposure is. So it really is just looking at every single event, every single club ride, and evaluating the risk and taking steps to make sure that we can reduce those. And that might be that if there's construction, we take a different route that day. But again, I think your clubs do an excellent job of that. And that is based on just the feedback that we have when we are doing the claims review and gearing up for being able to defend a club.
Excellent. Thank you. Moving on, talk about multi-day tours. Are they covered? Do they count as separate events? How does that work?
I will give that one to Miss Renee.
If it is an event where you charge a fee, that would need to be scheduled to the policy as a special event. If it's an event that lasts longer than 5 days, we need to have pre-approval from the underwriter before that can be a covered event.
Glad I asked. That's great. Thank you. Say a club has 1,000 members. Maybe they have some life members, but in a given calendar year, only 200 or 300 of them ever ride at all. What number should they use to purchase insurance with?
Want me to take this one?
Sure.
Or would you say the one?
What we say is if they never ride, you do not need to count them as far as the insurance goes. But even if they ride once, you really need to include them in your member count.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Be conservative with your numbers. You'd rather be on the side of offering too much than too little, right?
Right.
Yeah. Can you differentiate between the repair and refurbishment for an organization that does that? We've had a few questions about this. And does it cover both paid staff who are doing that refurbishment and repair, or would it apply to non-paid volunteers as well?
Yeah, so I'll jump in. Renee can correct me if I'm wrong and add to, because I'm sure she'll have other suggestions. But when we think about repair and refurbishment, like we're thinking about the idea where, the member club, maybe they have a warehouse space, right? And before the weekly club ride, the members can go in there and maybe you need to fix something on your bike. And yeah, maybe you have someone who is more experienced or has dealt with a similar issue and they're helping. The liability arising from that activity is contemplated under the policy. Refurbishment, we look at that as if you are taking bikes in, refurbishing them, and donating them back out into the community, or um, it more of a advocacy type work with that. That is contemplated under the policy. Where it crosses the line is when we start selling those, right? We're refurbishing them and we're selling them. Do you agree with that, Renee?
Yeah, I think that is correct.
Yep.
I'm gonna look real quick.
So,
actually.
yeah.
As opposed to giving them away to kids, for
Yes.
instance.
Yes,
Okay.
that moves us into more of a business where there's a higher expectation, just generally from the liability perspective, if somebody pays for something, right? One way that we can reduce our liability, just as we're thinking, because that was a question, is making sure that you're working with local legal counsel on those bikes that you're refurbishing and giving out to release you from anything that goes wrong with it, right? The last thing we want is for someone to, the best thing is that they receive a bike that maybe they couldn't have had before. The worst case scenario is that they receive it and something horrible happens and the family says, like, if not for Kevin's bike club giving my father this bike, this wouldn't have happened. So that's one way, as we think about refurbishment. We haven't had a claim like that, so it didn't come top to mind, but it's a good best practice.
Good. Could you unpack the excess medical policy a little bit? What's covered? Like dental issues, for instance? Is there a deductible on claims? What are the limits and stipulations that you can share?
Yeah, for sure. So the biggest piece, the biggest trigger of in the event of a injury during one of your club rides is that the claims analyst is going to have to be able to confirm that this individual was a member of your club or a participant in a special event that was scheduled. They're going to want to know if the event was or the injury took place during a scheduled activity that's approved by the club, right? If it's just a weekly meetup and it's not something that the club is organizing or putting on their website or anything like that, that policy doesn't cover, follow them. But if it happened during a club activity, the policy, should provide the coverage. And it's medical expenses is a $10,000 limit. There might be a small dental benefit, but it certainly isn't designed to, take place of, traditional dental insurance or, a true, if there was a serious injury, you could see where that would go very quickly. So designed to provide coverage for those medical expenses that are not covered by the individual's primary insurance. It's excess over any other value collectible insurance. So if I have personal insurance, medical insurance through my employer, and I am injured on a club bike ride, and my policy has a $5,000 deductible, that $5,000 deductible under your personal insurance would be eligible for consideration under our policy. There's a $500 deductible for the individual who is accessing the policy, but that deductible can be met by if you had to pay deductible under your primary insurance policy. So it can get a little, there's lots of pieces to it, but it is, it's a $10,000 limit. It is in its excess. I think those are the key things to remember, and it has to be during a club activity that the injury occurs.
Thanks. Has the release of liability waiver been updated this year, or will it be? Will it be a new one?
It will not be a new one. So the sample waiver that we provide, and we always recommend that you have your legal counsel look at it to make sure that they don't have anything to add. But the sample waiver that we have, we look at annually across all of our insureds and make any changes if there are any based on experiences in lawsuits and like, oh, if we would have had this, it would have been better. But there are not any changes for 2025 to that schedule.
Are there any options available for international coverage?
Yeah, so we do not have any options available for the international coverage. I would want to kind of dig into that a little more in terms of like the background on that question. So if we're looking for liability insurance, you know, I don't know that we have a good solution. If we're looking for insurance, like travel insurance, so if we're injured over,
Yeah.
outside of the US and my personal medical insurance doesn't follow me there's some options that clubs could look into independently from us. I mean, we could help, but it's actually online and it's really easy to navigate, or you could require your club, your member clubs to purchase that coverage. But the liability piece, we don't have a solution to offer.
It gets complicated, doesn't it? Club rides are often delineated by a speed group, A, B, and C. And it's a good practice to have a ride leader for every ride, but should there be a ride leader for every speed group? So every micro group that is out on the course?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's a good question for, us to kind of think about, Kevin, you kind of knowing that space, purely from a risk management perspective. And I say that because we never want risk management to get in the way of your mission, right? And so if all other obstacles were out of the way in terms of like, do we have enough ride leaders? Can they show up every time? What happens if we have ride leaders by speed 6 times, but on the 7th time, we only have one ride leader? How does that change our liability, right? So purely, if we were to look at it from best practice, absolutely. If we could have a ride leader at every speed, I think that's great. Do I think that I don't know that it necessarily prevents something from happening, right? You can still have a crash, you can still have a vehicle that we can't control, all of the different things, but that ride leader having that responsibility of knowing like, what do we do next? So I think it's a great best practice. Saying that to also say that I understand that could also be a big challenge to be able to find that many ride leaders for every ride.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's just generally a good idea, aside from that, for someone to be in charge in some way,
Right. Yep.
Let's see here. Is there a base number of included mountain bike events in the club coverage this year?
So I think we're talking about the 52.
Yeah, they have to purchase that. It's not included in the.
Yeah,
base.
is there a base number that is included, or any mountain biking should purchase
Any
the
mountain
additional
biking
mountain
would
biking?
trigger the need for the mountain biking
Okay.
coverage. So, and that is consistent with recent years as well.
Great. Let's see here. There's been several questions about this, so I'll reiterate. Non-members of your club that come on board, there's a free first trial to ride with your club. After that, you should encourage them to join as a paid member or an official member. But in terms of folks that just sort of, you're out on the road with your club and maybe some folks just glommed on, there's very little that you can do about that. But if something were to happen, they are not covered under this policy, is our understanding, correct?
Yep.
Yeah.
Again, that is the intent, for sure. But there isn't an audit out there. So if someone were to say, it would be really on you, Kevin, to say like, yep, this was their first ride, even though they show up every week. But
Yeah.
I came across a good question, not to jump in here, but I
No,
think it's
please.
a good clarifying question,
Yeah.
which is, when we were talking about education, we talked about the cost to do classroom education, classroom only, no on bike, and then on bike rate. So it's one or the other. If you are offering education, you don't have to buy the classroom coverage plus the on bike coverage. So it's the only difference there. You don't have to buy both. It's one or the other.
Yeah.
Or not.
Okay.
So yeah.
Excellent. Time trials are covered. This is one that I haven't thought of before. What about duathlons that are also running time trials, like would that be covered? It's sort of this gray area between a competitive and a non-competitive event. Can you shed any light on it?
Yeah, what I would say is that the policy really isn't designed for that. It's designed for your cycling exposures.
Uh-huh.
Now, if it happened and there was a claim, do I think it would be covered? Maybe, right? But I would say that generally speaking, that wouldn't be the intent. Certainly, if you have that scenario, reach out to us. It could be something that we talk to the carrier about to see if we can make an exception for.
Great. There's been lots of questions about mountain biking and gravel. Every year, a little bit more. I love it. We have said in the past that no matter what the surface type is, if it is wheels on the ground, no jumps or ramps, it is a road ride, whether that's asphalt, concrete, crushed limestone, or gravel forest road. It's really the like jumps and berms that make a ride a mountain biking event. That is still the case, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So there's a couple that do mountain biking, but no jumps or ramps. Again, sort of a gray area here.
Really.
I always kind of explain to people, I used to mountain bike back in the day, believe it or
Yeah.
not.
Nice.
It's a yeah, I about broke my neck too. It's a single track where
Mhm.
you're going over rough terrain, and I mean rough terrain. To me, that is mountain biking. Like if you're going through a woods over rough terrain, single track, I would classify that as mountain biking.
Right.
Um, if you're on a gravel road where you don't really necessarily have to use a mountain bike, and it's, you can ride 2, 3 wide, I would not consider that mountain biking. Does that help?
Yeah, yeah. It does. I mean everyone's definition of rough terrain's a little bit different, but I think I get the gist. Thanks, Renee. Let's see here. There's a request to view the pricing page again, if you're willing to share that.
Sure. Do you know if it is
Oh,
advocacy?
I think it would be the club one.
Let me see here.
And while you're bringing that up, there's been questions about e-bikes. Yes, all three CPSC classes of e-bikes are covered thanks to a lot of work by Gina and our staff at the league. So thank you. And I believe on any e-bike you can find the class. If you cannot, it may be an out of class e-bike, in which case it's probably not something that is covered. We want to make sure that things are official and inspected and secure. Um, oh, I'm still sharing. There we go. I am looking for one. Can you provide an example of a claim on non-owned auto coverage?
Sure. Am I sharing my screen, Kevin?
Yes, you are. We're seeing it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great. My view keeps changing, so I'm like,
Oh,
what am I
yeah.
So non-owned and hired auto. So an example of that would be, let's say that you are the vehicle that's following the ride. Maybe it's a fundraiser, and let's say that the vehicle strikes a pedestrian and injures that pedestrian, and there's a lawsuit against the club for that. Right now, there would be no coverage for the club, right? Even if it were my vehicle, I was driving my own personal vehicle. So the non-owned and hired auto liability coverage is really designed to provide coverage for the club itself. And then so that would be a liability claim example for a vehicle. Or if you're going to, let's say you're going to the summit. Now, this example works a lot better for organizations who don't generally just jump on a bike share bike and ride, but let's say you're going to the summit and you rent a vehicle in DC and you're driving to the summit and something happens and the club is sued. That would be an example of something that would be covered under a non-owned hired auto policy.
Do you want to talk about events that a club might host that are social events and how alcohol might pertain to coverage?
For sure, yeah. So anytime you have alcohol at your event, we do recommend that you reach out to us just so that we can talk through it. Because the standard general liability policy provides coverage for what we call host liquor liability, which means that there's certain criteria, right? Like the club isn't deriving a profit from the sale of alcohol, or you didn't have to have a license to have the alcohol at your event. All of these different things. There's a really fine line of when a traditional liquor liability exposure may exist. So if you're having one of those events, we recommend calling and talking through that individually with us, because there's some risk management steps that can be taken to transfer that exposure to another entity. Let's say that it's at a fundraising event, right? And you are using a caterer, like you should be getting protection from the caterer for that liquor liability exposure, as opposed to assuming that is the member club. And we can talk about ways to do that, so, depending on the circumstances.
Excellent. Thank you. And lots of different states have different e-bike laws around e-bikes, as well as some federal lands have different laws about e-bikes. So we ask that you check with your local laws before making a definite plan. Let's see here. What is the minimum premium membership count when it comes to clubs? Would that be under 75?
It looks to me like it's like 48. So if I just take the minimum premium and divide it by the rate there, so yeah, somewhere around 48, I think.
Great. Let's see here. If a club were actively inviting their members to participate in another event that they themselves didn't host, another entity hosted it, does the club then have some liability exposure if something goes wrong at that event?
Yeah, so I would say that certainly that's the thing about liability. You have liability in everything you do. So, at trying to making resources available to that member to participate in another event, absolutely, or even an event that's, co-organized. So, but what I would say is that the liability protection, it's a bike related activity. The liability policy that's in place, if there was a claim, so let's say as an example, that member is injured in the other entity's event, and that member sues not only the event organizer, but also sues the member club, because the member club made the information available through, their club membership. The general liability policy, I can't say it will provide coverage, but it is something, in my opinion, that would be considered under the policy for that. If you're co-organizing an event, because I think that I saw that jump in there as well. If you're co-organizing an event, I strongly encourage working with legal counsel to have an agreement in place that outlines each entity's responsibilities and the liability, and getting mutual protection, like from both parties. So you bring your insurance to the table, they bring theirs, and we're going to protect each other from the negligence of our own negligence.
Great. Can you talk about the upper limits of the liability policy and the D&O policy without referring to any specific claims? Are there multiple limits for the D&O policy? Can you buy additional coverage for it? There's some question about whether to make that leap.
Yeah. For sure. So on the directors and officers liability policy, the options that we offer, there are two levels online of options that we offer. So I'm actually trying to find that slide here just so that I can have it in front of me. So for $1 million limit, I think the out-of-pocket cost is about $600 a year. And then for a $2 million limit, the out-of-pocket cost is $900 a year. I am an insurance agent, so I am not going to tell you that you shouldn't buy as much coverage as you can afford. But what I am going to tell you when I think about bike clubs, I have directors and officers liability, which includes that employment related type exposure. I have not seen losses over $1 million. That does not mean that that doesn't change today or tomorrow, right? I'm just saying based on our experience today, I haven't experienced that. And please don't hear that as that you only need $1 million, but that's what I would say. On the flip side, with the general liability policy, because I think that was could be part of the question as well, the general liability, we absolutely have seen bike claims under this program that reach $1 million plus. So if you're thinking about, do I need an excess policy, those types of things, there's really what we would call, without trying to scare anybody, just that it's really catastrophic verdicts, if you will, in our society. So if you were to even Google, like, how have verdicts, increased or changed over the last 5 years, you're going to see a huge increase in verdicts just across the board. So that's why I say, one, on the general liability, we've seen it. So I wouldn't give you the same answer on the D&O as I do on the general liability, but on the D&O, because of the trend that we're seeing with other liability coverages, it could be, today, a year, 2 years, and we might be in a situation where we see higher verdicts out there.
Thanks. There's been some questions around e-bikes and classes, and I don't want to dwell on it too much, but very generally speaking, there are 3 classes of e-bikes. An e-bike is considered a bike with operable pedals. So if a member comes and this bike does not have operable pedals, that's a really good indicator. Class 1, of course, goes up to 20 miles an hour. Class 2 is throttle possibility and goes up to 20 miles an hour, I believe. And Class 3, no throttle, but goes up to 28. And all 3 of these are covered. And yeah, there's a lot of not great players out there in this world. The definition, unfortunately, will continue to blur a little bit. But I would say if I were leading a bike club, I would want to do my due diligence. The goal here is not letting motorcycles and mopeds on your club rides. And as long as you're confident about that, you have some protection there. But for the sake of the insurance program, it's all 3 classes of e-bikes as defined by the CPSC. And I was looking for a direct URL to an infographic I've seen. I don't see it out there, but off the Google, but it's there. It's there. A few clubs near the Canadian border, Gina, and we've talked a little bit about international rides, express that frequently they'll have group rides that will cross the border for a mile or 2 and go back in. What's your advice to groups like that? Should they reach out to a Canadian provider or just try to avoid crossing the border? I didn't realize border crossing was that easy and that common, but what do I know? I'm landlocked.
Right. Yeah, Renee, unless you have a firm answer on it, what I would say is I would ask that individual to reach out to us. I feel like what I would want to be able to provide is here's how I think the policy would respond. There are some, there are some there's some language in the policy that I think could be helpful in that situation where we're not going and organizing the event in Canada, but our event takes us over there for a mile or two. So I don't know, but it might need to involve the insurance company's interpretation of the coverage. So would just encourage you to shoot us an email on that.
Great. Yeah, lots of great questions, and feel free to always reach out to Renee for all of these specifics. I know that it's bike clubs and advocacy groups the definitions are always changing, and the work that we're doing is always changing, and it's so broad that it is difficult to create a watertight package around everything that we do. So when in doubt, please reach out. We're wrapping up our time here. Just to recap, the coverage you're hoping to go live on Friday, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And probably don't expect support on Monday for the holiday, but you'll see everything there, and in the coming days and weeks there will be a brochure and other information on the American Specialty website, and that's americanspecialty.com/LAB. And if you have membership questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'm Kevin at bikeleague.org. But with that, I want to thank everyone for joining us. Gina, any final words?
I don't think so. Just again, thank you again to all of you for the partnership, and so very, very thankful for that. And certainly on years where we see claims starting to improve, and knowing that is the hard work of the clubs, and so we appreciate that. It makes it easier, happier for us to deliver. Any increase is not great to deliver, right? Like I understand that, but much happier to deliver one that we feel is really in line with market conditions.
Absolutely. And we go over those claims, and it's heartbreaking to see them, but things have been getting generally better, and we're just so thankful for long-term partners and friends at American Specialty. Thanks for all your help, and thanks to all of our member bike clubs and groups out there. Have a wonderful evening, and a great 2025 event season.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
All right, take care.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.